Hello, everyone. We're glad that you're joining us today for the DEI grantee training from our role of the Disability Resource Coordinator, or DRC series. I'm Laura Glennick. Here's my lovely mugshot. I'm with the NDI Technical Assistance Team, and I'm joined today by our guest presenters, my colleagues, Miranda Kennedy and Kevin Nickerson. Today's presentation represents the fourth in an ongoing series targeted to all DRCs, their DEI project leads, and DEI local level support staff in all rounds of DEI projects. And I really want to thank those at both the state level and the local level for bringing additional partners with you. I think this is one of the most effective strategies, and we appreciate it and welcome those who have joined us. During today's presentation, Miranda and Kevin will discuss the potential role of DRCs related to asset development strategies. And according to the Department of Labor, asset development strategies represent various approaches to enhance long-term economic self-sufficiency. And the Department of Labor included asset development as one of 6 practices and strategies identified as critical elements to improve employment outcomes of youth and adults with disabilities for the first 4 rounds of projects. Asset development as a service delivery component was selected by 21 of the 31 rounds 1 through 4 projects, and it certainly plays a very critical role for projects focusing on the career pathways model, which currently is round 5 and will also continue with those who are awarded under round 6. Training and technical assistance to help DEI projects at both the state and local level in understanding and implementing the asset development service delivery component is provided by our team, the NDI Technical Assistance Team, and the evaluation of the impact of the DEI's project implementation and outcomes of asset development strategies is provided by the DEI evaluation team. I'm going to quickly visually introduce you to our wonderful guest presenters. Again, Miranda Kennedy, who is our Director of Training and Senior Technical Assistance Liaison, and Kevin Nickerson, who serves as the Asset Development Subject Matter Expert for our team. So upon completion of today's webinar, you will come away with how asset development fits into the Workforce Innovations and Opportunity Act, ties into the Workforce Innovations and Opportunity Act, also known as WIOA, the power of asset coalitions in serving customers with and without disabilities, how to assist workforce customers in accessing free tax preparation services, strategies for incorporating financial literacy into career center services, and then finally how the financial assessment tool developed by the DEI and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau can help job seekers achieve their financial goals. And so while that is a lot, I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Miranda Kennedy, to talk to you about how she and Kevin will achieve those learning objectives throughout today's presentation. So Miranda, I turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Laura. Can I just get a quick sound check? Can you hear me all right? Laura, I'll go ahead and take that as a yes, you can.
Yes, it would help if I didn't mute myself. I could tell you that much better. Yes, you sound great.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. It's great to be on with all of you today, and we're looking forward to getting into this discussion and walking through this information today. You know, those learning objectives that Laura just walked through with all of you. Well, our agenda pretty much mirrors those learning objectives, so we're hoping we're able to stay pretty on track. First, we are going to talk about how asset development ties into WIOA, and would like to give a great shout out to the lead center who helped us with some good information on that, and we have some information from them we'll be sharing with you on those connections. Then we're going to be talking a little more specifically, actually quite a lot more specifically, about the DEI, the power of asset coalitions that we have seen in serving individuals with and without disabilities. And I'll be handing it over to my colleague Kevin to cover that. Then I'll be discussing with you free tax preparation services in the Career Centers, which may sound familiar to a number of you as well. Hopefully some of you who have done that as part of your DEI work. And then Kevin will be walking through information on incorporating financial literacy into the Career Centers. And we will be wrapping up together in concert, Kevin and I, talking about incorporating the financial assessment tool that was piloted by DEI and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Good job with the acronym there, Laura. And how that was piloted into the Career Center services, and how some of the information we have to share with you on the progress that that is making in some of the sites that have taken that initiative, and how you can jump on board and get to be a part of that with all of us. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about our first piece here, how asset development ties into WIOA. Well, before we talk about that, I just want to say, I don't know about all of you, but when I first thought about WIOA and asset development, I thought, wow, that sounds like a complicated new topic. And I love this quote from Sir Richard Branson, who's the founder of Virgin Group, which of course you all know includes the airline. And he said, complexity is your enemy. Any fool can make something complicated. It is hard to keep things simple. So we're going to strive to keep things simple in today's training. And Sir Richard certainly knows a thing or two about being successful, simplicity, and asset development. While he dropped out of school at 15 because of his severe dyslexia, he went on to become a massively successful businessman who even owns his own island in the British Virgin Islands, of course. His group, Virgin, comprises over 400 companies. Talk about assets. So in thinking about our topic today, I thought Sir Richard, as a person with a disability who's gone on to accrue some very nice assets, would help us to be aspirational. And actually, it turns out that a high percentage of successful CEOs do have learning disabilities that they attribute to being key in fostering their out-of-the-box thinking and subsequent financial success. So there's an interesting tidbit as we get started. So on that promising note, let's talk about WIOA and asset development. The enactment of WIOA in July 2014 really provided us with new opportunities for the workforce development system to participate in financial literacy activities. The purpose of WIOA, as many of you know, is not only to support a comprehensive, accessible, and high-quality workforce development system, but also to increase worker and employer prosperity and increase self-sufficiency. So to these ends, the legislation includes several provisions that focus on financial literacy for youth and adults with and without disabilities. The American Job Centers are uniquely positioned to extend the promise of financial stability to prospective job seekers and workers with disabilities by serving as a bridge to accessing accurate informational resources and successful strategies, many of which we're going to talk about today, to assist in improving one's financial capability. Through collaborative efforts with other federal agencies, WIOA mandated partners, community-based organizations, local asset building programs, and the financial services sector, the workforce development system can leverage the power of partnerships to facilitate access to financial capability services for their customers in the job centers and in the broader community. So we see here on the slide in front of us this great quote from the July 2015, talk about hot off the presses, Lead Center report on integrating financial capability and asset building strategies into the public workforce development system. It states that the new WIOA offers state workforce development boards, local career AJCs, and youth service providers the opportunity to play a critical role in ensuring that youth and adults with and without disabilities have the chance to develop critical financial literacy and financial capability skills that enhance their ability to attain and maintain employment and turn their work into economic stability. we're going to have this report available for you for download as a PDF along with the PowerPoint from today's presentation. So don't worry about how you're going to access the report. We'll get it to you. You'll definitely be wanting to check that out. All right, so we see here when we're talking about WIOA and asset development, when we're talking about youth, WIOA ensures that youth with disabilities will receive extensive pre-employment transition services so that they can successfully obtain competitive integrated employment. WIOA supports disconnected youth, of which youth with disabilities comprise a high percent. And here we have 3 bullet points talking about that. And we know many of you are very familiar with, of course, that local areas are increasing their percentage of youth formula funds used to serve out-of-school youth to 75%, up from 30% under WIA, and also requiring local areas to spend at least 20% of youth formula funds on work experience activities. Additionally, and we've highlighted this for you, allowable is providing additional allowable activities including financial literacy education and entrepreneurial training. Whew. So under WIOA, each state receives that federal funding allotment out of which the state can reserve up to 15% for statewide activities under the law, with the remainder distributed to those workforce development boards based on prescribed formula. So the WDBs use the formula grants to contract for youth programs, and the AJCs, which are in turn required to provide the set of services specified in the federal law and regulation. So WIOA includes financial literacy as an allowable statewide activity and as one of the services that youth providers and the job centers are required to offer. So when we're talking about WIOA and asset development for youth and adults, WIOA provides guidance on the use of state funds to provide services that build customers' financial education and financial capability. And it does so as a program element for youth and an allowable service for adults to support financial literacy. And this includes an individual's ability to create household budgets, initiate savings plans, and make informed financial decisions about a number of things such as education, retirement, home ownership, wealth building, or other savings goals that are probably familiar with all of you on these calls. In addition, talking about increasing the person's capability to manage their spending, their credit and debt, and that includes credit card debt, and to do so effectively, as well as understanding the availability and the significance of credit reports and credit scores in obtaining credit, and that includes, determining their accuracy and how to correct inaccuracies in those reports and scores, and their effect on credit terms. And of course, we know how that can affect employment and a number of things as well. And finally, helping people to understand how to evaluate and compare financial products, services, and opportunities. WIOA even supports activities that address the particular financial literacy needs of non-English speakers. So this is really woven throughout and isn't just for job seekers with disabilities, which has been a focus under DEI, as Laura talked about when she talked about the high number of our DEI projects from rounds 1 through 4 who had tackled this topic. You'll see that you're very well situated now that this is incorporated as such in the law. So we know you'll be very interested in this last slide we have here about WIOA, asset development, and performance measures. We could talk about WIOA and asset development quite a bit. There will be a lot more information in that report for you as well, but we did want to point out that, performance measures, this is going to speak to everyone. And an important factor and reason to emphasize financial capability is the change in performance measures under WIOA that captures entered employment at the second quarter after exit rather than the first quarter under WIA. And WIOA also captures percent employed at the fourth quarter after exit rather than the second and third quarter under WIA. And as you all know, asset development strategies can really help WIOA customers meet those performance measures. We're going to talk more about that. Many, if not all of us, have done a lot of hard and strategic work to get someone employed, only to have that individual then experience, through no fault of their own, the loss of that employment due to a car breaking down and not having the resources to fix or replace it, or the loss of housing due to inadequate financial planning or other reasons. Some of that inadequate financial planning, for instance, might be where individuals with disabilities are easy prey to predatory lenders, using payday lenders or non-banking resources that lead to significantly increased debt at high interest rates. So WIOA is addressing this issue, realizing that financial capability is an essential tool to help people stay employed through managing their income and addressing the person's essential needs that allows them to stay employed. And with that, I think I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Kevin, to talk to us about the power of asset coalitions. So Kevin, the ball is yours.
Well, thanks, Miranda, and I'm going to assume you can hear me, or I'll be getting a chat here shortly, wondering why I'm not speaking, so thank you. That was a great lead-in to asset coalitions and what they can do for our customers. And before we get into that, we thought we'd offer you a few, or actually a couple operational definitions. The first is, what the heck does asset development mean? So to talk about all these, what a coalition is, how to develop it, we've got to start with what asset development means. And it is basically the collection of tools, resources, training, referrals, and actions that increase individuals with and without disabilities' knowledge of financial products and services, and to change behaviors, that's a difficult one, that lead to improved financial stability. So that's asset development, and the devil's in the details. We'll get into some of those details later. But what's a coalition then in terms of our operational definition of a coalition? That would include key community partners who have an interest in improving the financial stability of low-income and or individuals with disabilities through a variety of strategies unique to the needs of each community. And I would add, and unique to the circumstances of each customer. So that's what a coalition can do. It's really this collection of folks that have similar vision of what we should be doing in our community. So that's great, but what is your role? What do you do as a DRC? Well, I guess that depends. It depends on if there is or is not a coalition in your community. And we'll say if there's not an existing coalition in your area, as a DRC, it is entirely appropriate, and I would think a good use of your position and time for you to take the initiative to identify and work with key partners in the financial and disability community to develop one. So to get that started, what do you do? Well, you start by identifying asset building resources and information and materials at the local, state, regional, and national level to be disseminated at the job center. You will have to keep those updated too. So what are some examples of that? And this is where the devil's in the details, but this could include things like IDAs, individual development accounts. Are they available? Who has them? Who would you connect with? How many are available? Who's the local CWIC? How do you process a Medicaid buy-in application? And if you're wondering what Medicaid buy-in is, well, it's certainly a strategy. Then what is it, and how do we get people connected to that? Those are just examples. One of the things we're going to share with you later is a tool that we've created. And this can actually be one of those first bits that you collect and use in your center if you like what you see today. Next, of course, you'd meet with your potential stakeholders in your disability financial community to really get those relationships started, and most importantly, I think, to build that buy-in, again, that buy-in for the coordination of these services and efforts. And in terms of the buy-in, all I can tell you is this, folks, having had to do this and try to get that buy-in, it's all about finding that common vision, that overlap in your shared mission statements. And I think if you dig and you find out about your partner agencies, you'll find that that exists, and that will be the strength of moving people forward in this effort. Of course, next would be to establish a way to meet with these folks regularly. Now, some groups, actually ours is still alive and well here. I'm speaking, of course, from some of my experience under the New York DEI Round 1 project, and of my own efforts in the efforts under Round 1 of developing coalitions. But that next step would be to meet regularly, and that can vary. It might be monthly, it might be quarterly. It really depends on what you decide. But I think to this point, what I want to tell you is this, that after you identify and get those key stakeholders to commit to this coordinated effort of a coalition, your next step really should be with that group to set priorities and goals for what you do next. Because I can still recall that first meeting, everybody around the table looking at each other going, what do we do now? We got here, we got the right players together, what do we do next? And that's why I'm just going to tell you, I think right off the bat, it's good to identify what is this coalition, what is its purpose, and maybe what are you going to do in that first year, maybe some basic goals for that first year. And as a reminder, this last bullet just is a reminder to you that you should include senior WIB staff as active participants on this coalition. I think especially in light of what Miranda laid out with WIOA that's coming soon, they're going to be very interested in what resources are available in the community for customers of the AJC. So the DRC can do some other things here, such as working to conduct ongoing in-service training for AJC staff and partners on asset development models, services, strategies, so that the folks within the center certainly know what this is all about. Because I think the reason I think this is so important is that community awareness, which we'll talk about next, really starts in your own house. So first you have to get people on board at your own center. They have to understand what's going on, what this means, and what it might mean as you get into the weeds in terms of the supports this can offer to customers. One of the ways you can kind of build that additional community awareness and help to promote this as a DRC is to convene things such as an asset summit with leaders from your local community and disability and asset communities. So now this is really that next step to sort of announce, okay, we exist. Here are some of the things we're working on. Again, going back to that maybe one-year focus, what's important to us, what do we want to achieve, how does this relate to the folks that we want to serve. But again, that purpose is to further expand the awareness of the coalition and its efforts in your community. And these are just ideas, folks. I mean, you may come up with your own ideas. In fact, I suspect as you meet with a coalition, you will develop events that might mimic some of these ideas or might be very new and different, and we would love to hear them if they are. But other things that have been done and to some good effect are things like financial fitness fairs, Super Saturdays, days when really focused on tax preparation, and events to raise that, again, awareness of what are asset building strategies and why is completing a tax return important, right? Talking about EITC and all these other ways that you can help people build resources that they're not thinking about generally. Next is, in terms of your role, what you could do is expand that asset development work group partnership base. And I'm going to show you in the next slide here, I think, or two, some likely folks that you should be talking to for your coalition membership. But again, as your coalition matures, you'll certainly evaluate the membership you have, and you will likely think of members that don't exist as it should exist. And so that sort of evolves over time. Last but not least, document and any of the education and outreach so that this can be reported and shared with the LWIB and partners. I mean, that's not why we're doing this, but it's good for folks to know if this is working, what it's doing for folks, and to maybe even give an example or two of how it's impacted somebody's life. So on the flip side of this coin, there could be an existing coalition in your community, and we hope that there is. So what is your role as a DRC if there already is a coalition? How can you strengthen that? Well, there's certainly a lot of things you can do. One of the things I just talked about and would be continually important is to evaluate the partners that exist and to try to decide, is this the right membership? And I'm sure it will be, but there may be others that are not included that you might want to recommend. Maybe you'll help to invite those new folks. You can create new expectations. I think this is a big part of what you can do as a DRC. It's really, and we have more information on this, but really as a DRC, you can bring to light some of the things that most folks don't really think about, such as the expectation that all members of your community can contribute, including people with disabilities, that they can save for their own futures, and access financial products and services. Often the folks that we serve, for whatever reason, are just not accessing these resources, these products. And certainly in our communities, I think there's not that, I mean, if you were to survey folks, that expectation that maybe somebody on disability is saving for their own future. So we have a big job. That's a big lift, I think, to really get people to think differently about what we should be doing with this audience. You can intertwine the work of the coalition with the mission of the AJC, and I got to say that with WIOA, I think that job becomes much easier. In fact, I think you'll be welcomed on both sides of that fence in terms of what you can do to bridge this work. Expanding the vision of the coalition, well, that's hard to play out exactly how that looks in a PowerPoint presentation, but that can look in that can take a lot of different directions. And we're going to give you an example that's near and dear to my heart of some things that have been done in New York. Certainly wasn't where we started. I had no idea that's where it would end up. But I think it's your job always to think about, what are we doing now? How can we improve this? What are the needs of our community, and how do we address that from the perspective of this coalition? And of course, you're in a perfect position to assist your WIB in developing policies and practices related to asset development strategies within the AJC and the workforce system that reach beyond people with disabilities. I guess we could say anytime we can think about this in a way that provides a universal design for customers, you're going to get traction, and you're probably going to go far with your idea. So in terms of those partners, let's look at some that we would think of, probably you would think of, whether I showed this to you or not, and maybe some that you wouldn't have thought of. But there are certainly groups that exist currently that do have this focus on financial stability, and this is some, not all, but some include United Way. Certainly financial institutions have a sort of an outreach, and especially credit unions have a community interest. IDA providers, that's individual development accounts that I mentioned earlier. It doesn't have to be credit unions that run IDA programs. It could be any kind of provider in your community, so you're going to have to research that. Prosperity campaigns or tax coalitions, microenterprise and or small business supports. I think if you do some digging, you'll find some financial education trainers in your community, and we're going to talk about that as well. They're important players in how you can bring this to the AJC, and of course credit counselors. Now, in terms of our world, our work, and what I think you should be considering as a DRC, here's some others that should be part of this coalition that's very specific to the folks that we are serving, particularly individuals with disabilities. Community work incentive coordinators are top on that list for good reason. I think they're very important. It doesn't mean that everybody that we serve through this project that has identified as having a disability is going to be receiving Social Security benefits, but we know that a high percent that come to our centers do receive benefits. So having that person on the coalition is critical. In fact, I would further say that the benefits and work incentive planning services are a cornerstone of any financial coaching or counseling that individuals with disabilities should be able to count on. So it'd be like us going to the bank to get counsel on an IRA or something, and the person doesn't know much about the interest rates or something ridiculous that we would expect that person to know. So that person, that CWEC, is critical to our audience and should be really a part of the glue and the fabric of that coalition. Independent living centers, of course, make sense. Community rehab providers are often part of the mix, and certainly your state VR agencies. You're going to get a lot of referrals from state VR. There could be other community agencies, and I mentioned housing. We have 2 housing agencies on the coalition that I helped to establish years ago. Of course, the AJC, cooperative extension centers, and I bet I missed a lot of folks that you could think of that you could put on this list. So, but this is just a primer to get you thinking about this. So again, I'm going to go back to this new expectations because I think it's really important, and your role is rather influential, or can be, and I think it's a good use of your role to sort of model these new expectations. So what do we mean by this? Well, again, I think we have to come to this conclusion that there should be an assumption that all people want to have better lives or to better their lives. And how do we do that? Through increased earnings, long-term savings goals, access to these financial products and services, again, that most of us are taking for granted, but a lot of people don't know about these resources. This is one way that we can engage folks. And certainly the next bullet talks about engaging people with disabilities in the conversation. We'd be kind of remiss to not do that. So if you're developing a summit or some event to promote this work, and maybe, maybe you don't have a coalition and this isn't something that you're going to do right away. But, you know, assuming that you do, how could you take it to the next level? I think you can do this at a summit. I think you can bring somebody to the table that can speak to this firsthand, not about what we think is good, but let's talk about an example of somebody that's used some of these strategies whose life has been improved. And I can think of a fellow that we brought to a summit that we had one time that was still driving a car that I helped this guy get just so many years ago. Through the use of a PASS, or a plan to achieve self-support, a work incentive through Social Security, that he was still driving to work. That was pretty powerful, and he just, you know, was really able to spell that out in a way that I couldn't sell. You know, it meant more coming from him. Providing simplified opportunities for individuals to really get on board and improve their financial stability. We're using all these terms. We really have to keep this simple. What does this mean? It means, like, do you have a budget? Do you know what it means to have a budget? Do you have saving goals? You know, I mean, when we break it down, this is really what we're talking about. Whenever possible, we got to make this as simple for individuals as we can. The other thing that we know from research is that financial literacy is limited for most Americans, including people with disabilities. But this is why I think this is built into WIOA, because this is not a disability issue. This is sort of become an American issue. And so I think anything we bring to bear isn't just helping our audience, it's going to help all AJC customers. And I think next we should just assume the desire of people with disabilities to live a middle-class lifestyle. I think that's just where we should start from, because I think it's what all of us want. And then we have to expect that the systems can adjust to support this change, this movement. And they do. I really do believe that they can. But sometimes you have to get a little traction first. So again, thinking about you, the DRC, and what you can be doing, and identifying the gaps and opportunities. And I think after this slide, you'll see how this kind of plays out. But I think you're critical because there's two levels you're working at. Maybe not specifically you, but that you're certainly aware of and informed of, and that's at the local, or I'm sorry, the individual level, where you might help somebody through an IRT. This is going to inform you of the needs of your customers, right? You're going to see these things unfold because you're working directly with the folks, or at least part of that IRT process. Again, this is an opportunity for me as a reminder to you that it's critical in that IRT, if somebody does get Social Security benefits, that CWIC or somebody who is qualified to provide that guidance about SSA disability benefits is part of that team. I would say that person is as critical as somebody who's certified as a financial coach to folks without disabilities, or to people at large, I should say. It's just as critical that person that has that background can be in the mix to help our customers that do receive Social Security disability benefits. This is a huge reason why many folks don't move forward, because they don't understand the implications of work and benefits, and they've made a lot of incorrect assumptions based on things they've heard. So these are things that you can kind of evaluate at the individual level. Now, when you're looking at the system level, you can certainly assess and modify customer flow, you know, kind of seeing how things work at your center. For example, and we're going to, again, show you this tool soon. Maybe this could be built into the intake, or maybe there could be some questions, you know, at intake that talk about whether somebody is comfortable with their finances, or if they need some counsel about this. Again, this tool, I think, that we're going to show you will help you at least get started. It might not be what you use, but it might get you thinking. So more on the role that you can play as the DRC. You're busy enough, I know. You're probably thinking I have a lot to do already. And here's another thing I have to add. This really isn't another thing. This is really just a piece of the big picture. And, you know, Miranda couched it nicely to think, you know, and WIOA really does that, you know, this is about the long-term vision of stability for folks, right? When we leave these pieces out of the equation, we just don't have the same level of success. So when I was talking about earlier what you can do, what your role is, you know, this goes back even to the DPN days that were the days I started in, where we started to look at this coalition and the formation of the coalition. And so that was, you know, I'm going back to some times here where I had a direct role with customers. And so I had a really good idea of what was working, what wasn't. And some of these things came after that too, under round 1 DEI, such as the wage reimbursement program. This is a need that was identified locally. Now you might say, well, there's already wage reimbursement programs, and there are. You're right, and we are cognizant that we do not want to replicate things that exist, and this really didn't exist in the way that it was built out under our coalition. This really provided a huge amount of flexibility in terms of the employers we could engage with this and how quickly we could access these funds. And it had a very specific focus. It had a focus on ticket holders. So we really wanted to help to jumpstart the ticket efforts further, I should say, jumpstart our ticket efforts. And we used this to help with placement work. And it was great. This was one piece that didn't exist. This was something our coalition helped to develop grant funding for. So, you know, it was limited time. I had a certain amount of money, but what a great model. What a great way to model something that might work better than what exists now. And it did complement, actually, the other wage reimbursement programs nicely. The next piece here that I wanted to bring to your attention, something that was developed out of a need that was identified, is our innovation fund. I think I'm you know, most proud of this piece. I think it's really done a lot of good for a lot of folks with a little bit of money. And this was something that we did, you know, many years after the formation of the coalition I was involved with. But this really focuses on helping job seekers that have a specific need that is not being covered in some way in the community. I have a little story I want to tell you about. I'll call her Jill. Jill was part of our ticket program at the time, was receiving, of course, services through the AJC as well, and WIA services, and is then working as a nurse and continues to work today as a nurse. But within the first month of employment, her, and Miranda alluded to this a little bit, her car was inspected and found to be in need of new tires. Now you might say, well, she's got a job, she can pay for it. Well, timing is everything in life. And you know, when she started this job, it happened within the first week. She didn't even have a paycheck yet. And even if she did, that's a pretty hefty expense to have to come up with after being out of work so long and then having something come up like this. It was a $500 expense, in fact. She just wasn't prepared for. So through this innovation fund, the tires were purchased, and we were able to act immediately on this need. You know, we had certain evaluation criteria we were looking at, and I think it was money well spent. This allowed her to maintain transportation to work, which really would have been difficult. There really wasn't any other transportation she could have taken. And there really wasn't any other local option to support this need. So we would have been in a tough spot if this hadn't existed. So she was able to maintain employment because of this support. This is a very specific example of what one coalition did in the country, and it's just to get you thinking about all the options that can exist, all the things you can do when you identify your local need. Because if you identify a local need that makes sense to your local funders, and you have the right people in the mix, and I got to say, I got to give props to our United Way, who had strong connections to the local funders and was excellent at pulling together, you know, grants for this sort of thing. And they did this for us. Of course, we all worked on it as a coalition and had a little piece of the writing of that mini grant. But pretty neat stuff. And that was all because of needs that were identified after the coalition was formed, when we started saying, what do we do next? Well, what we do next is we identify those needs, and that's precisely the driver's seat that you're in as the DRC. Okay, I think with that, I'm going to hand the ball back to Miranda to talk to us about free tax preparation services.
Great, thank you, Kevin. All right. I was taking a look at the list of folks we have joining us today, too, and I thought a few of these folks could talk about this very easily. And I know we also have some others who are very, very new, even some brand new DRCs. So we've got quite the spectrum we're speaking to today with these different strategies. But one of the things we do want to talk to you about, and just give you a little bit of background, so free in-person tax assistance, what we're talking about here, what will sound familiar to many of you, is VITA and TCA. So VITA is Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, which offers, so you'll have heard of VITA sites, many of you. VITA offers free tax help to people who make less than $53,000 a year, or persons with disabilities, the elderly, and limited English-speaking taxpayers. Additionally, we have tax counseling for the elderly, TCE, which offers free tax help for all taxpayers, particularly 60 years of age and older, specializing in pensions and retirement-related issues. And this assistance is available throughout the community. We're going to talk about how to tap into that and what you all can do as DRCs around this and what some of our DEI projects have in fact done. But we do want to make note of the fact that for both VITA and TCE, IRS certified volunteers, these people know what they're doing. They're the ones who are providing this free basic income tax return preparation with electronic filing to qualified individuals. And again, they're volunteers, so be nice to them. But these IRS certified volunteers, they provide tax counseling, and they're often retired individuals associated with nonprofit organizations that receive grants from the IRS. So that's a little background about VITA and TC and what that is, for those of you who might not be familiar with that. Now, we do want to talk about the potential role of the DRC related to free tax prep. And here we're talking about there are some things that you can do in your role as a DRC, and these are, they might be a bit of an initial lift, but they're a really good one. But we're talking about working in coordination with your local WIB, your job center, your career center leadership to, first of all, ensure that all of your job center customers are informed about the Earned Income Tax Credit, EITC, and then having the Career Center linked to local VITA sites in your community and other free tax preparation options. We've even had some who've served as VITA sites themselves, so that's something to think about. And where you would establish as a minimum baseline that the following target audiences, certainly we would like beyond that, but at least these audiences would incorporate savings and asset building objectives in their plans, including guidance on accessing free tax prep. It's a little bit like, let's make sure all of our folks get benefits planning, because that's a really nice solid foundation and you're not ending up building a house of cards, right? You've got a good, strong foundation to build that excellent plan we want to build for folks. And when we're thinking about that, a really obvious first place to start would be any and all of our integrated resource teams, have that be consistently incorporated throughout. So we've got some good quality control on that. Additionally, with ticket holders, as you're developing their work plans, ticket holders that are being served through workforce employment networks, getting them access to this free tax prep, as well as anyone accessing DEI training funds, which many of you have, some of you may not in your projects. They're also sometimes known as DEI flexible employment funds. And it's additional funding for supportive services to get folks. Under rounds 1 through 4, it was associated with enrollment in WIA, intensive and training services, where you would have a case manager and a team. As well, you would have that focus on IRTs and ticket holders utilizing those DEI training funds to make sure we're getting really good quality employment outcomes for folks. Well, that free tax prep, one more key piece to that. And it's free, and it's a great way to partner. So where do you find your nearest VITA or TCE? Well, we have this information for you here, where DRCs can locate and begin establishing a connection between VITA and TCE and their career center. You can do that by using the VITA locator tool, and there's also a 1-800 number that you can call there on the screen, 800-906-9887. And your nearest VITA and TCE sites are generally located at community and neighborhood centers, libraries, schools, shopping malls, and other convenient locations across the country. And we have had some of our career centers serve as VITA sites, so something to think about, although we know that there are space restrictions in a number of areas, but if you had the space, that would be fantastic. Talk about one stop, right? But that has been one of our key findings, in fact, is serving as a VITA site. And then you can certainly serve not just job seekers with disabilities, but all job seekers. And this would be a really great way to do this, especially everything we just talked about under WIOA. Let's see. So in terms of free online self-preparation, where there's not the assistance but the online self-preparation, many of our DRCs have worked with their career centers to provide access to My Free Taxes using the resource room computers. And My Free Taxes provides free federal and state tax prep to eligible individuals and families in all 50 states and DC. And some pretty impressive numbers here. Since 2009, My Free Taxes has helped millions of filers claim more than $10 billion in refunds. And effective October 16th of 2015, United Way Worldwide will be operating www.myfreetaxes.com along with a national helpline that can be called. And so, again, another key finding here, consider making My Free Taxes available in the career centers. We've had a number of our DEI pilot sites work with their career centers to make this happen on resource room computers and inviting folks to come in and do this. And it really is an easy lift and another positive step that disability resource coordinators and their centers can take to address economic self-sufficiency for all job seekers under WIOA. This is where the work that we're doing to help job seekers with disabilities and those who experience multiple barriers to employment, it's really intuitive work that can be helpful across the board and beyond the population that we're serving. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kevin to talk about strategies for incorporating financial literacy into the Career Center services. So Kevin, go ahead and take it away, and I'll be handing you the ball.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I'll tell you, folks, the truth is this is not rocket science, so there's only a couple slides on this because you probably, if you haven't already figured this out, could figure this out. But just to keep you organized and to think about the role that you can take, certainly the first thing, again, and we kind of mentioned this earlier, but you have to really get your job center staff to understand the relevance of financial literacy for all customers, right? And it sounds good. These are all buzzwords, and that's great. But it isn't until you start talking about the person that you actually help, like the example that we gave, that it starts to have some context and meaning. And I think that's what you can do, is make it applicable to the customers that come to the center. Not just talk to the staff about, well, our grant says we should do this. Yeah, well, that's great, but what did it do for Joe? What did it do for our customer? And that's how I think you can really play a role here. Next, you can work with the LWIB and your AJC leadership to prioritize action, coordinate activities, and problem-solve issues related to introducing financial literacy into the Career Center. In short, I think if I was going to rewrite that bullet, I'd say basically leverage management to assist you in establishing this process if you need to. But also, even if you didn't need them, they should be part of it, part of the mix here. So next, and something that I remember doing years ago that was very helpful is to look at who are the providers locally that can offer financial literacy classes, training, etc. We gave you some examples. It might be a credit union or a bank, a cooperative extension center. That they were the ones in our area that had so much going on. And of course, our credit union too. Family self-sufficiency programs certainly will have a component. And bring these people to the table. Invite them to attend monthly, or to be on your monthly calendar of events. This also helps them. It helps them to promote more broadly and to a larger audience what they're doing, and to get more folks in front of them. So I think it's a win-win, really. But that's really what you want to try to do. And this is not, again, the nice thing about this is not just for customers that have disclosed a disability in the center. This is for all customers. So there should be really no pushback in this arena, especially with what's coming down the pike with WIOA. So you also want to add information to your intake process. I think this is the next progression of incorporating this into your center, is to look at how do you do business when people come through the door. Would anybody know that you have this offering? It could be that you first bring a trainer in that can do sort of a monthly training or whatever the schedule may be, and that you offer that calendar of events and highlight that, hey, we do offer financial literacy training and resources, and it might be just that class. But if you really were to advance this agenda, I think you'd really want to look at your intake and the questions you're asking customers that come in the door, and whether for example, they use if they want help with a budget, if they have a solid financial goals, etc. Whatever it is that just starts that those leading questions. And the tool, again, that we'll show you really does help with that. This can provide a baseline evaluation of your customer's needs, this financial assessment, and certainly that it ties directly to the employment goals and where the person wants to go with us moving forward with employment. Miranda gave great information about free tax offerings and tax preparation services. Well, that's not any good if information isn't available, right? So make sure that that's available. Of course, you'd want to highlight that closer to the tax preparation season, but make sure these things are available. You wouldn't believe how many people are still using predatory tax advances and things like that cost them so much money when online tax preparation is fast, it's easy, and it's free for a lot of folks, for most folks. So our key finding, I guess, in this arena would be that making financial literacy classes available in the Career Center, assuming space is available, which in most cases it is, as a training offering is a step that DRCs and the centers can take to address economic self-sufficiency for all job seekers, especially under WIOA. So next we want to look at this tool we've been talking about. It's just a basic financial assessment tool that was developed by DEI and CFPB, and how this can help job seekers, at least advance their financial goals. I don't know if it'll help them achieve it, but it's certainly going to help people advance their goals because we're going to know a lot more about them. So where this came from, under round one in New York, which I was fortunate to be part of, in partnership with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we modified significantly a tool that was part of a larger toolkit that CFPB has, which if you haven't looked at it, you should, called Your Money, Your Goals. And so this was just a piece of that because we didn't want to overwhelm people with this process. So we took just a little chunk of that and we started working with them closely on this to modify this for our use. We started this way back in the summer of 2013. And the purpose was simple, to develop a practical tool that would start that conversation with our customers about their personal finances, which, by the way, is generally the last thing that people want to talk about with folks that they don't know well, and sometimes with folks that they know well too. But we were surprised that some folks are open to this and actually happy to be engaged by us with this opportunity. And that's what it does. It does provide DRCs an opportunity to engage customers in sort of identifying those financial goals and their current financial situation. And again, that baseline, where are people at? Where are they at? Where do they want to go? What are their goals? And some next steps came out of that for each customer. So if we were to boil down the goals of this tool, and then we're going to actually show you at least a part of the tool to give you just a glimpse of what this does. So the goal was, there was a lot of different pieces of why we did this and why we wanted to incorporate this into our DEI project. Certainly it was, in my mind, it was to increase the knowledge of local resources available to support financial literacy and one-on-one coaching for our customers. And when I say, increase knowledge, that was meant at our DRCs, and myself included, because I had been through this process. So, if you're going to start talking to folks about this, you have to have some sense of what's available in your community to make those resources available to those folks. And that's exactly what this is, what this does, what this kind of forces that process. To better understand credit and its impact, for some folks, I had many people say, I don't need credit, I'm never going to take a loan, I really don't care. But it's more than that, what credit does. It certainly can impact employment. A lot of employers are looking at credit reports. So it isn't just about getting a loan, although that is a big reason why we want good credit. Helping customers understand the advantages of tax filing. We already learned about some ways to get this for free instead of using those predatory practices. That's to better understand financial products and services. In order to do that, guess what? You have to talk to those folks that have those products and services. And generally, those folks are part of your coalition, so that won't be a difficult reach. And if one doesn't exist, to encourage the formation of the asset coalitions and communities in order to better serve folks and to have that storehouse of information, if you will, under one roof, all these folks with the common vision of helping people improve their finances. So if we look at the tool itself, though, the primary goal was just to have this concise product the AJC staff could use, not be intimidated by. And again, this is a part of a really great toolkit. But if you're not a financial coach, that toolkit can be pretty intimidating if that isn't your wheelhouse, if that isn't your world that you live in and day out. And so that was the point, to pull this out, make it just a primer. And that's its main purpose. To get that dialogue started with customers, expand it to additional state DEI project. That was our hope, which is why we're sharing this with you today. And again, it provides that baseline for asset development implementation. So where are you now? What could we do? You have that conversation, and all of a sudden, with the knowledge that you have as DRCs, you know, that Rolodex in your head is spinning, and you're thinking, oh, wow, I could implement this, or I could use this work incentive, or whatever. And increasing the knowledge of the local resources that will assist customers, right? And as a result of the tool, you really had to know that, because one of the things that we offered to people when they were done with this process was to take those next steps. Well, what are they? Probably a referral to somebody that knows a little more than me. And again, this is not to take this step where it makes you the expert. We're not suggesting that. In fact, this was developed in such a simplified way that it's obvious that this is not a complete assessment when we work on these with customers. But here's just a sneak peek. I think it's only about 4 pages or so. So it's only about 15 questions. And here's just a few of them. I really like this first question because it does set the stage to speak to people about their goals and dreams that motivate them. You know, because we all have our own ideas, but I'll just take it off here. Most people have their own idea about what it means to be financially stable or secure. What does that mean to you? Because, you know, here you are trying to help that person in the employment arena. And I think it's important for us to know, what does it mean to be stable? That means something very different to me, I'm sure, than it does to the folks on the phone and to our customers. And so this was really telling when we started to get the different responses from folks. Next, do you have like financial goals and know how much to save to reach them, right? So if not, there's opportunity to comment. Most people do have goals. And the reason they're sitting across your desk asking for help getting work is because the money translates really to the dreams and goals that they have. I mean, that's a means to an end. So it's great to understand what motivates people. Some are more practical, some of the questions. And remember, if you're somebody that has a lot of experience in financial coaching and you're looking at saying, boy, I don't know if I could develop a baseline from this. This is not to develop a complete budget or anything like that. This is just to get the party started, if you will, to get the conversation going and to get people headed in the right direction and referred, in most cases, to the next resource. So are you in danger of losing your housing? Are you able to cover all your bills and monthly living expenses? And you can be sure that the answer there is probably not always, right? That's why they're looking for work. Here's a few more that we wanted to show you. Do you get any of these programs, right? So from a benefits point of view, we have to think about what people receive, what the impact that might have with their work activity that they hope to achieve. SSI disability questions, are they in danger of having their utility shut off? So is it immediate? And if you notice, there's these tips underneath here. And some of them are more broad in nature. Some of them can be localized. So you can really shift and change this tool and make it your own. And that's what we hope you do when you get to the point where it says, you know, where you're going to send somebody. Well, you'll have a whole list of your local resources. So this is just a really quick sneak peek of the tool. We'll give you the full product so you can check it out and use it, hopefully, if you think it's worthwhile. And so the customer goal and financial situation assessment tool has been tested, and it's been in use now for a little bit, with help from the New York State DEI project, which we're pleased about. And since Miranda is the technical assistance liaison for New York and has direct knowledge of the tool and its purpose, I think I'll hand the presentation back to Miranda to talk to us more about the practical application of the tool and maybe even give us an example of why we think it's kind of neat.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. All right, in our last 15 minutes here, let's walk through some of this information, and we do want to talk about how this tool was tested. You know, it started off, Kevin, what was it? It was like 17 or 18 pages initially, and we thought that's just not going to work with Career Center staff, and it ended up being, I think it's 5 pages with about 3 pages of questions, maybe 17 or 18 questions. So it definitely got pared down quite a bit, and it was part of that paring down process and boiling it down to the essentials was absolutely facilitated by our colleague, the new DRC statewide lead in New York, Jerry Walsh. She's the DRC statewide lead for the Round 4 project in New York, and she was a Round 1 DRC and has a great background with asset development as well. So we're very pleased she was able to help work on this, and she did. And she's been able to, she learned quite a bit in her role, and she's provided us with an overview from one customer's perspective that we're going to share with you, and then we'll talk about how her experience in this tool and what we've learned from that has already started to impact some of your peers, and how we hope that this might provide you with some information and ideas and strategies as well, because we know you're always looking for and asking for very specific strategies, so we hope you can get there. Okay, so we're going to talk about Jamie's story, which are Jerry's lessons learned from utilizing this tool with one individual that she worked with in particular, which provided a great deal of insight. And from the perspective of working with folks and bringing into play an asset development tool like this, which was different, and being the person to model and test out its use and figure out how to support other Career Center staff and her fellow DRCs in using this tool, she had some things to teach us from her own experience, and here's what Jerry had to share. She really felt that, a person needs to be ready to share, but offering the opportunity by using this tool is the only way you're going to find out if that's the case. And offering the opportunity to review finances with customers more than one time. Someone may be ready at a later date, so you might be planting seeds. And we talked about customer flow and when to insert this tool. That might look different in different career centers, and it might look different from person to person, and that flexibility of when and how you might utilize that. But then you might want to have some structure too, by having, okay, anyone who's in an integrated resource team or anyone using our DEI training funds, where you make sure that you're utilizing it with those folks. But really her 3 lessons here, her third one was that finally, it's easy to come to the table with preconceived notions about people and finances. And having a formalized tool keeps us from overlooking questions we might not ask. And that, in fact, is the key to using the tool. You have to ask every question, and you have to do that consistently with everyone. And so the story that really exemplifies why this is important, and I have to tell you, Jerry's not someone who you would think, many of us, we try not to have preconceived notions, but it can happen. She had worked with this woman, Jamie, who was 60 years old and who was on SSI. And at the time that Jerry met Jamie, she was receiving unemployment benefits as well as a monthly check for $864 from a private disability policy. Jamie submitted an application to SSA to see if she qualified for benefits, and she was cashing her check using a local check cashing service for $30 per month. In addition to this, she had a long ago work history in housekeeping, and Jerry admitted that she would not have asked if Jamie had student loans, which she did in fact have, and which were a financial burden. So the tool helped identify and address the issue of the student loans from long ago, as well as that use of the local check cashing service, which was $300 a month, which that racks up to $360 a year. So right off of the bat, they were able to access supports and services to address those 2 issues and get Jamie a bank account, get her student loan issue, which was a burden, addressed, and they're not questions that Jerry would have thought to ask. And that was a pretty powerful lesson too, and Jerry's been kind enough to share that lesson, not just with her New York DEI project, who is now utilizing this tool, but also with others. And we're going to talk about how this is rolling out and just give you some examples of how a couple of different states are using that. But really that financial assessment tool, it's currently being incorporated into Career Center services with the New York Round 4 project that Jerry leads, as well as Maine Round 4 project and the South Dakota Round 5 project. As Kevin mentioned before, you know, the goal is to have the DRCs model using the tool through work at the individual level, say the integrated resource teams, ticket holders, DEI training funds again. Those are good, obvious places to start, beta testing this locally. We've also had a number of DRCs piloting the tool with job seekers with disabilities, and the results of this piloting has broader implications, as you'll see, at the systems level, including potential use for all job seekers served under WIOA to provide a financial baseline and begin addressing financial capability. So you're probably beginning to see a bit of a theme here that, hey, we might be piloting using this tool for our targeted population here, but these resources and strategies are useful for anyone. And if we get them launched center-wide for anyone, then that is only going to benefit the job seekers with disabilities who come in who might additionally need some benefits planning or other information more specific to them. So we want to give you a little more detail around the 3 projects who are currently utilizing that, because we know you probably have questions. But in New York Round 4, where this was all piloted, they're currently requiring their DRCs to incorporate this tool into their work and work plans for all of their ticket holders, as well as individuals receiving their DEI training funds. Additionally, they have shared the tool with all of their center management. On a July DEI monthly call that the project holds, and financial empowerment was one of the topics on that call, and this tool was shared there, in addition to requiring the DRCs to utilize that tool so that center management could conceive of how this might go beyond the DEI work and work with people with disabilities and benefit others. So this tool has been shared with partners in New York. In Maine, with the Round 4 project, we had a series of site visits with their local areas and state level folks, and actually I'm the TA liaison there, and we brought Jerry out and we presented this tool to 3 different local career centers and shared this tool that way, and have been talking about it quite a bit since. So now at the state level in Maine, all ticket holders, there's a statewide ticket holder staff member for their Workforce Employment Network, and they've implemented using this tool as part of their benefits planning with all ticket holders across the state. And it's also been incorporated into work plans for all of the integrated resource teams, and starting in September, it's going to be required for those receiving Maine DEI flexible employment funds, which some folks call DEI training funds. And the DEI leadership in Maine has shared this tool with Career Center managers and partners across the state, including New Ventures, who used to be Women Work in Communities. And the managers of the different programs and their partners across the state are very interested in using this tool, and their programs are figuring out how they might be able to do that. And of course, the goal is to make the financial assessment tool a routine component of WIOA services and other program services as well. In South Dakota, with their Round 5, in addition to having the DRCs utilize and model the use of this tool for staff and partners, and they've modified this tool in Maine and in South Dakota and in New York, as Kevin talked about. They've entered their own local and state level resources into the tool. In addition to doing that, DEI project leadership has also shared the tool across the state with local offices as part of the employment plan for any WIOA customer. It's a little bit of a rare situation in South Dakota where the DEI project lead has recently been assigned and is now the new WIOA state level administrator, so there's some pull there in their ability to share the tool with WIOA case managers across the state, and they're going to be monitoring that and evolving its use based on the feedback that they get. So those are 3 of our projects that are currently in the process of starting to use this tool, their vision for how they might use this tool and how they can roll that out. And so now we want to give you an idea about what you as a DRC, what you can be thinking. You can see that there are others who are doing this, so just some thoughts on how to begin using that tool. Really, we'd encourage you to review the template of the tool, which we can provide you and will provide you for download at the end of today's training, as well as We encourage you to review examples. If you're interested, you could certainly reach out to me, and I'd be happy to share examples of how other DEI projects have tailored their tools, incorporating local, state, and regional resources. It's fairly self-evident, but if you'd like examples, more than happy to give those, although you'll have to include your own examples. There are some base examples included in there, though, right, Kevin, from the beginning, from kind of national level resources, correct?
I believe so, Miranda.
So you'll have a baseline to start from. All right, so you'd want to tailor that tool for your local area, asking your partners from the disability and financial community, from your asset coalitions to assist. And you know, if you're building those coalitions, this could be one great way to gain buy-in and start some momentum and have a project to work on together, because, you know, if you can have a project together, that's a great way to form a coalition. And certainly beginning using the tool consistently, as we've said, is part of every IRT, as a work plan, you know, included in the work plan for every ticket holder your workforce EN serves. And if you have DEI training funds, making sure you're attaching the use of this tool similar to how you're attaching, you know, free tax prep and other resources we talked about earlier. And then once you're comfortable having figured out how and when to use this tool as your part of your Career Center's customer flow, and modeling that as a DRC, then you can share your experience with the Career Center leadership, partners, and staff, much as Jerry has done in her local area and across the state in New York. And then, of course, giving staff and partners copies of your tailored tool and continuing to model and work with staff and how to use this tool, because it is a new world where we're using these and talking about these topics that we haven't typically done in the past. If in your local area you have this background, that's fantastic. You're starting from a higher ground, and we look forward to hearing back from you and what other tools and resources you're using. But finally, you know, just encouraging staff and partners to consider using this tool, as our other 3 DEI projects have been doing, with all populations who might benefit across multiple programs beyond serving just job seekers with disabilities. Certainly job seekers with disabilities will benefit. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and, hopped ahead a little. I'm going to go ahead and hand the ball over to, I didn't hand the ball back to myself, so I'm not sure which slide you're on now, but I will hand the ball over to Laura to talk about the summary for today's presentation and the information that we covered there. Laura?
Great. Thank you, Miranda, and thank you, Kevin. Always love to just listen to the best information, and I think today you heard a lot of things about concepts, you saw examples, you have resources, and there's a tool. I don't know if it gets better than that. So today, Kevin and Miranda talked about how asset development ties into the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, and that's key. It really is key. As we move forward, that's the new law of the land, so it's great to know that it's not new. Asset development, what you were doing before, fits into what you're doing now. The power of the asset coalitions and serving individuals with and without disabilities. Universally, anybody, as you heard Kevin and Miranda shared, would benefit from asset development strategies, and certainly the coalitions to bring all of that together. Free tax preparation services in the career centers. We've had the benefit of collaborating with some of our own projects at NDI, and as well with national and state level projects, to make sure that tax preparation services that are free for most of the customers that would come to a job center are available at a job center. Financial literacy and the career centers, as was shared, that is huge in WIOA, and so we want to make sure that it's connected. And again, through the DEI projects, that has already started, so we're just continuing what we're doing to help the job centers. And then incorporating the financial assessment tool in career center services. As Miranda and Kevin shared, at one point it was a discussion. New York helped work with CFPB to modify that and break it down so that it would be beneficial in the career center. But that's not enough. What we think will be beneficial, we don't always know. And we, through the New York project, and now Maine and South Dakota and others as well, are incorporating it to really show how it can be an effective tool for all customers who come into the Career Center. Miranda is in the process of now downloading what's going to be quite a few of the materials, including the PowerPoint, the financial assessment tool, the report from the lead center. And as she does that in front of the lead center, and we're going to do that if for some reason you are not able to download any of those materials through today's webinar, just reach out to Miranda, Kevin, or myself, or your TA liaison, and we'll make sure that you get them. So as Miranda's doing this, so we thought this is a wonderful topic, and a topic that doesn't need to really end here. There's some other great concrete examples. And so in lieu of having question and answers today, we're going to devote our technical assistance office hours that will take place on September 22nd. 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, and we're going to discuss other DEI-related asset development strategies and their possible and the possibilities under WIOA. Again, there's some great concrete things that have been taking place, and I think as we all know, a concept is one thing, but having a greater understanding of how that works is another. Miranda?
We are having some technical difficulties, just so you know, in terms of the download transfer file for today. So we will pull together, if you've left your email address when you registered, we'll pull together a list and be sending out these materials to those folks who registered. And if you have others who have joined you today and would like them, we'd encourage you to please forward that information along to them. And I think if that's the only technical issue we had today, that's good.
That's not bad. We can strategize around those.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. And we look forward to having you all join us on our TA office hours. Please do take a moment to fill out the post-training survey. Thank you, Laura.
Great. Thank you, Miranda and Kevin. Here's their contact information. And again, we will be following up with all of you. Thank you for joining us today. Especially thank you for who tapped into other project staff within your workforce development system to join you. And we will be sending out this week the announcement for the technical assistance office hours. And we look forward to joining you again later on. Thank you. This concludes today's webinar.